August 23, 1944. 12:41 a.m. 10 Downing Street, London. The city is dark. Not blackout dark, London has learned to live with that, but quiet in a way that feels unfamiliar after 5 years of war. The distant hum of engines is gone. No sirens. No bombs tonight. Just the ticking of a clock somewhere down the corridor. Inside the Prime Minister's study, a single lamp burns low. Winston Churchill sits hunched forward in his chair, cigar unlit between his fingers. The ashtray beside him is already full. He hasn't slept. Not really. Sleep hasn't come easily since Normandy. A clerk enters silently and places a folder on the desk. Fresh cables. Priority. Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force. Churchill looks at the red markings. Midnight messages are never routine. He opens the folder. And as his eyes move down the page, his expression changes not to relief, not to triumph, but to something far more dangerous. Surprise. The cable is short, brutally efficient. Reports from France. U.S. Third Army. General George S. Patton. Churchill reads once. Then again. Cities liberated ahead of schedule. German formations bypassed, not engaged. Bridges seized intact. Fuel columns improvising on the move. The numbers don't align with the maps on the wall. They can't. Patton's armored spearheads are advancing faster than Allied planners believed physically possible, faster than British intelligence predicted, faster than logistics officers swore could be sustained. According to the cable, entire regions of France are being cleared before the supply lines meant to support them even exist. Churchill exhales slowly. He walks to the wall map and places a finger on it. Normandy, Paris, the Seine. Then farther east. Patton's arrows are already there. Too far. Too fast. Too soon. Only weeks earlier, everything had seemed fragile. After D-Day, the Allied armies had fought their way inch by inch through the hedgerows of Normandy. Bocage country, dense, suffocating, murderous terrain. Progress measured in yards. Casualties measured in thousands. For a time, it looked as though the liberation of France might drag into winter. Then came the breakout. Operation Cobra. And suddenly the war changed shape. Where the British and Canadians pressed methodically in the north, Patton's Third Army, activated on August 1st, exploded forward like a released spring. Armor first. Then infantry. Then more armor. No pauses. No breath. Patton did not advance in neat lines. He surged. He curved. He flowed around resistance rather than crashing directly into it. German units waited for battles that never came. By the time they reacted, Patton was already gone. Churchill lowers himself back into his chair. He reads deeper into the report. German rear area, headquarters overrun before evacuation. Field kitchens captured mid-meal. Road junctions seized by reconnaissance units hours ahead of schedule. There is a sentence that makes him stop. Enemy appears unable to comprehend speed of advance. Churchill almost smiles. Almost. Because speed is intoxicating. And dangerous. He knows this better than most. Speed outruns supply. Speed invites overextension. Speed creates gaps, and gaps are where armies die. British generals had warned him of this repeatedly. Patton will go too far. Patton will outrun his fuel. Patton will create a disaster. Yet the cable keeps going. Improvised fuel convoys. Captured German petrol. Local French resistance guiding columns through back roads. Patton is not waiting for permission. He is making time. Churchill closes his eyes for a moment. You can almost feel it, That sensation when history tilts just slightly off its expected path. Down the hall, members of the War Cabinet wait. They had been summoned quickly, quietly. No formal session, no press, no announcement. Just urgency. When Churchill enters, the room falls still. He doesn't sit at first. He places the cable on the table. "Gentlemen," he says, voice low, gravelly with fatigue, "you should read this carefully." They do, one by one. And as they read, the same reaction appears again and again. Brows tightening, fingers pausing mid-page, eyes lifting toward the map. Someone finally speaks. This is ahead of the operational calendar. Another man clears his throat. By weeks. A third, quieter voice adds, possibly months. That is when Churchill finally sits. And that is when he says it, not loudly, not dramatically, almost to himself. This changes everything. Because this is not just about France. It is about Germany. Until this moment, Allied planners believed the war in Europe would grind on well into 1945, perhaps beyond. Hitler's armies were battered, yes, but still dangerous, still capable of counterattack, still capable of surprise. But Patton's advance suggests something else entirely. That the German army is not merely retreating. It is unraveling. Command structures collapsing. Communications breaking down. Decisions delayed because there is no time left to make them. War is not always decided by who has more men. Sometimes it is decided by who moves faster than the enemy can think. And tonight, the British government is beginning to understand something terrifying. If Patton keeps moving like this, the war might end sooner than anyone dared hope. Or end in chaos no one has planned for. Churchill returns to the map once more. He traces the Third Army's route with his finger. Each movement represents thousands of men. Each arrow lives balanced on momentum. He thinks of Napoleon. He thinks of 1914. He thinks of how quickly victory can turn into catastrophe when speed outruns judgment. And yet, there is a flicker in his eyes. Because for the first time in years, Germany does not look immovable. It looks fragile, breakable. The room remains silent. Outside, London sleeps, unaware that somewhere in France, American tanks are still rolling forward in the dark, engines growling, headlights covered, crews exhausted but unstoppable. And somewhere inside Churchill's mind, a question begins to form. If Patton does not slow down, what will the Germans do to stop him? The night in France does not feel like victory. It smells like diesel. Patton's headquarters sits in a converted farmhouse outside Le Mans, its stone walls trembling faintly as tanks pass nearby. Maps are pinned everywhere, doors, tables, even the backs of chairs, constantly updated, constantly wrong. Because the front is moving too fast to draw. Inside, officers speak in clipped sentences, runners come and go, radios crackle without pause. General George S. Patton stands over a map with his hands planted firmly on the table. He is smiling. Not broadly, not cheerfully. The smile of a man who senses the enemy losing balance. "Keep them moving," he says. "No halts unless the Germans force them." An aide hesitates. "Sir, fuel projections." Patton cuts him off without looking up. "Fuel is a problem for tomorrow. Tonight we chase Germans." This is how Patton wages war. Not by waiting for perfect conditions, but by creating panic faster than the enemy can recover from it. His Third Army has become something the German command has not faced since 1940. Relentless movement. Columns drive through the night, engines wrapped in rags to dull the sound. Tank crews sleep in turns, slumped against steel. Recon units push miles ahead, sometimes with nothing but jeeps and instinct. When they encounter resistance, they don't stop. They go around, or through, or past. By dawn, the Germans often discover the Americans were never trying to fight them at all, only to get behind them. In Berlin, the reports are incomprehensible. Army Group B sends requests for clarification. Where exactly is the enemy? The answers contradict one another. American armor reported west of Chartres. No, south of Orleans. No, already crossing the Loire. Commanders stare at maps filled with arrows that refuse to make sense. Patton is not advancing along a front. He is dissolving it. German generals trained in rigid doctrine wait for the decisive engagement, the battle where lines meet, where plans collide. But Patton offers no such moment. Only movement, only pressure, only uncertainty. And uncertainty in war is lethal. Back in London, the midnight cable circulates far beyond Downing Street. By morning, it reaches the desks of British intelligence officers who had built careful projections based on fuel tonnage, rail repair timelines, and port capacity. Their models do not account for what is happening. They cannot. Patton is advancing on captured German fuel, on French civilian trucks, on whatever can burn. The war is no longer running on spreadsheets. It is running on audacity. One intelligence officer reportedly mutters, "This is impossible." Another replies quietly, "It's already happening." Churchill receives a follow-up message before breakfast. Paris is rising. Not liberated yet, but rising. German authority is cracking under the speed of Allied approach. Resistance fighters sense it. Civilians sense it. Momentum is contagious. Once people believe the enemy is retreating, fear changes sides. In the French countryside, villagers emerge cautiously as American columns thunder past. They wave. They cry. Some chase the tanks on bicycles, shouting directions, pointing toward German positions already abandoned. A Sherman commander later writes that he felt as though the war was finally exhaling. But not everyone shares the optimism. At SHAEF headquarters, General Eisenhower studies Patton's reports with growing concern. The advance is astonishing and terrifying. Every mile east stretches supply lines thinner. Every gallon burned forward is one that cannot be replaced quickly. If the Germans regroup, if they strike the flanks, Patton's army could be cut off. Eisenhower sends restrained messages. Proceed, but maintain awareness of logistics. Patton reads them, acknowledges them, then continues forward anyway. Because he believes something the planners do not. That the Germans no longer have the strength or the nerve to counterattack at speed. And if he pauses, they might recover. Late one evening, a report reaches 3rd Army headquarters. German units surrendering without firing. Officers arriving alone, asking who commands this army that never stops. Patton listens, then says softly, almost thoughtfully, "They're scared. Not of American tanks. Of unpredictability. Of not knowing where the next blow will fall. Fear, Patton knows, spreads faster than bullets. And fear is now moving east." Back in London, Churchill receives another cable. This one shorter. More ominous. Enemy withdrawal accelerating, resistance sporadic, situation fluid. Fluid. A polite word for chaos. Churchill stares at it for a long time. If the German army collapses too quickly, the Allies may face a different problem altogether. Who reaches Germany first? Who controls the crossings? Who shapes the end of the war? Victory, once distant, is suddenly rushing forward, and no one is entirely prepared to catch it. Churchill lifts his pen and begins drafting a message. Not to Patton. Not yet. To the War Cabinet. Because what is unfolding is no longer just a battlefield development. It is a political earthquake. And its consequences are only beginning to reveal themselves. The map room beneath Whitehall smells faintly of ink and damp paper. It is early morning now. Gray light presses against the high windows as officers and ministers file in, coats still on, faces drawn tight with fatigue. The War Cabinet assembles without ceremony. No speeches, no pleasantries. Only maps. Churchill stands at the head of the table, cigar finally lit, smoke curling slowly toward the ceiling. Gentlemen, he begins, tapping the map with a thick finger, this is no longer a pursuit. It is a collapse. Silence follows, because collapse is not a word spoken lightly in war. A British intelligence officer steps forward and begins moving markers, small colored blocks that represent entire armies. German units slide backward. Backward again. Then vanish. These formations should be here, the officer says. They are not responding. Intercepts suggest fragmented command. Some divisions no longer know who they report to. Someone asks the question hanging in the air. Is this another trap? Churchill does not answer immediately. He looks at the map, at France opening like a door no one expected to unlock so quickly. I do not believe the Germans are capable of that level of coordination anymore, he finally says. Not at this speed. And speed is everything. Because intelligence is measured in hours. Sometimes minutes. Patton is stealing both. Across the channel, German headquarters seethes with confusion. Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge sends frantic messages up the chain. He cannot hold a line that does not exist. Roads are jammed with retreating vehicles. Luftwaffe units lack fuel. Communications are severed not by bombs, but by American armor simply appearing where it should not be. Officers argue. Where should reserves be sent? There is no answer. By the time a decision is made, the situation has already changed. Patton's advance has introduced something far more dangerous than defeat. Uncertainty. And uncertainty paralyzes command. At SHAEF, Eisenhower convenes his senior commanders. Montgomery is cautious, urging consolidation. Bradley watches Patton's progress with a mixture of pride and worry. The debate is sharp but controlled. How far should Patton be allowed to go? If he outruns his support and is cut off, the political fallout would be catastrophic. But if he is restrained, they might lose the moment. War, Eisenhower knows, is not won by caution alone. Yet recklessness has destroyed more armies than bravery ever saved. He authorizes continued advance, limited, conditional. A compromise that satisfies no one. Patton, informed of the decision, responds with a single sentence. We will continue to exploit success. It is not defiance. It is interpretation. Meanwhile, Paris burns with anticipation. German authority is visibly cracking, roadblocks abandoned, patrols withdrawing. French resistance fighters emerge in daylight now, armbands visible, weapons carried openly. They whisper the same rumor to one another. Les Américains arrivent. The Americans are coming. Not slowly. Not eventually. Now. And as belief spreads, German control evaporates faster than Allied bombs ever could. Churchill receives confirmation before nightfall. Paris is on the brink. The speed of Patton's movement has forced the Germans to choose. Defend the capital, or save what remains of their army. They cannot do both. Churchill reads the message twice, then quietly folds it, because the implication is enormous. Paris liberated not by prolonged siege, but by momentum. And momentum cannot be scheduled. Late that evening, Churchill stands alone again in his study. Outside, rain taps softly against the windows. He pours a small glass of brandy and does not drink it. Instead, he thinks, if Germany is unraveling this fast in the West, what does Hitler do next? A cornered enemy does not behave rationally. They lash out. They gamble. They attempt something bold, something desperate. Churchill has seen this before. In 1918, in 1940, there is a pattern to collapse, and it is never neat. He dictates a message to Washington. Careful, measured, but beneath the formal phrasing lies urgency. The end may be closer than expected, but the most dangerous days often come just before it. Across France, Patton's tanks continue east. Crews grow thinner, eyes hollow with exhaustion. But morale is electric. They feel it. The enemy is not pushing back. He is running. One tank commander later recalls, "It felt like we were chasing the war itself." Yet even as the Third Army surges forward, something unseen begins to form ahead of them. A line, not yet on the map, but real all the same. A place where momentum may finally meet resistance. And when it does, everything will be tested. Dawn breaks pale and uncertain over eastern France. Mist hangs low in the valleys, clinging to hedgerows and riverbanks like breath held too long. Tank engines cough awake one by one. Men climb back into steel that is still warm from the night before. The Third Army moves again. Always again. But something has changed. Recon patrols report fewer stragglers, fewer abandoned vehicles, fewer signs of blind panic. Instead, they find roadblocks hastily constructed, anti-tank guns dug in along crossroads, German infantry no longer fleeing but waiting. Patton studies the reports without comment. He knows this feeling. The enemy is no longer collapsing. He is choosing where to stand. Far to the east, Hitler has issued orders that cannot be ignored. The Reich will not retreat forever. Natural barriers must be held, rivers, cities, borders that still mean something on a map. The Seine was lost too quickly. The next line will not be. German commanders are instructed to buy time, any time. To delay the Americans long enough to regroup, rearm, reorganize. To slow Patton. Because if Patton reaches Germany at this pace, the psychological blow may be irreversible. And so, at last, resistance begins to thicken. Outside the town of Nancy, American armor rolls into prepared fire. The first Sherman erupts in flame without warning. Then another. For the first time in weeks, the advance halts. Radio traffic spikes. Artillery is called forward. Infantry dismounts under fire. The war, which had felt like pursuit, snaps back into violence. Patton arrives near the front personally, binoculars pressed to his eyes. He does not flinch at the explosions. Instead, he watches the German positions carefully. They are disciplined, organized. This is not panic. This is intent. He turns to his staff. "They're trying to slow us," he says, "not stop us." That distinction matters, because slowing can be more dangerous than stopping. It gives the enemy time. Time to think. Time to plan. Time to strike elsewhere. Back in London, Churchill receives new reports, less exuberant now. Progress slowed, resistance increasing. Casualties climbing. The War Cabinet senses the shift immediately. Momentum is fragile. Once lost, it is nearly impossible to regain. Churchill does not panic. But he does not celebrate either. Instead, he asks a single question. How long can the Germans delay us? No one answers confidently. Because delay is exactly what the enemy needs. Not victory, not counteroffensive, just delay. At SHAEF, Eisenhower confronts the consequences of success. The faster Patton advanced, the more the entire Allied front stretched. Fuel shortages become critical. Ammunition trains lag days behind. Bridges must be repaired under fire. Eisenhower makes the call. Priority supply shifts north. Montgomery will receive fuel for Operation Market Garden. Patton will have to pause. The order is delivered carefully. Respectfully, Patton listens in silence, then responds, "Yes, sir." He hangs up and slams his helmet onto the table. For the first time since August, the Third Army is forced to wait. The engines fall silent. The momentum bleeds away hour by hour. And the Germans feel it. In Berlin, relief flickers. Not hope, but relief. The Americans have stopped. Even briefly, it matters. German units begin to reform behind rivers and fortifications. Plans take shape. Desperate ones. If the Allies are overextended, if their supply lines are thin, then perhaps one last gamble remains. Churchill senses it too. Reading between the lines of intelligence reports, he feels the shift in the air. The war has not ended early. It has entered its most dangerous phase. Because now both sides understand the stakes. The Allies know Germany is weakening. Germany knows time is running out. And when time runs out, men attempt the unthinkable. Late one night, Churchill returns again to the map. He traces Patton's halted arrows. Then his finger moves east, toward the German border, toward the Ardennes, a region quiet, forested, ignored. He pauses there longer than anywhere else. A thought forms, uncomfortable, unprovable, but persistent. If Hitler were to strike again, where would he strike? Churchill exhales slowly. The message he read at midnight changed everything, but it did not end the war. It only revealed how violently the final act might arrive. And somewhere in the darkness beyond those trees, another storm is already gathering. November settles over Europe like a heavy coat. Cold seeps into bones. Roads turn slick with rain and mud. The bright, reckless speed of August feels distant now, a memory carried by exhausted men who no longer count miles, only hours of sleep. The front has hardened. From the North Sea to Switzerland, the war becomes a line again. Patton's Third Army grinds forward in bitter fighting across Lorraine, every village contested, every ridge paid for. Gone are the open roads and cheering crowds. Now there is artillery, mines, ambushes at dawn. Momentum has become endurance, and endurance is slower. In London, Churchill studies daily briefings with growing unease. The reports speak of resistance stiffening everywhere, but also of something stranger. Unusual troop movements in the German rear. Rail traffic increasing at night. Panzer divisions withdrawn from quiet sectors. Nothing definitive. Nothing provable. But patterns rarely lie. Churchill has learned to fear patterns. He remembers 1940, the silence before the Blitz intensified. He remembers 1918, the final German offensives that nearly broke the Allies before collapse. A desperate enemy does not fade away. He lunges. Churchill sends discreet inquiries to intelligence. What is Hitler preparing? The answers come back uncertain. Weather too poor for large operations, fuel shortages severe, German morale collapsing. Reassuring words. Dangerous words. Because reassurance breeds blindness. In Germany, Hitler refuses to accept the shape of defeat. He no longer believes his generals. He believes in will, in surprise, in one decisive blow that can fracture Allied unity. His plan forms in secrecy. A massive armored strike through the Ardennes, the same forest used in 1940, aimed at splitting American and British forces apart. A gamble of everything that remains. Few are told. Fewer believe it will work. But belief is no longer required. Only obedience. At Allied headquarters, intelligence fragments fail to connect. Each report alone seems minor. Together they form something ominous, but no one sees the whole picture yet. Except perhaps Churchill. He cannot prove it. He cannot point to a single document. But he feels it. The same sensation that visited him before disaster in earlier wars. A tightening in the chest. A sense that the enemy is about to move, not defensively, but violently. He writes again to Washington. Not alarmist. Not dramatic. Simply cautious. The enemy, when most pressed, may yet attempt a bold stroke. It is the closest he can come to a warning without evidence. In the Ardennes, snow begins to fall. American units rotate in green divisions, placed there because the sector is considered quiet. A place to rest. A place to refit. Patton's Third Army remains to the south, battered but experienced, its men hardened by constant fighting. They do not know it yet, but soon the entire Allied front will depend on their ability to move fast. Once more. December 16, 1944. Before dawn, German artillery erupts across the forest. The earth shakes. The silence shatters. The last gamble has begun. And within hours, frantic messages race across Allied headquarters. Lines broken, units surrounded, roads choked with refugees and retreating troops. The unthinkable is happening. Churchill receives the news before breakfast. He does not curse. He does not shout. He closes his eyes. Because now he understands what the midnight cable in August truly set in motion. Speed had frightened the Germans into collapse, then forced them into desperation. And desperation has a sound. It is artillery in the dark. At SHAEF, Eisenhower asks a single question. Who can move? The answer comes quickly. Patton. Only Patton. The same man whose speed once terrified planners is now the only one capable of saving the front. Within hours, Patton turns his entire army north, a maneuver many believed impossible. And as snow falls heavier over the Ardennes, engines roar back to life. Once again, momentum becomes destiny. Churchill receives one final message that night. Patton is moving. 3 days. 90 degrees. In winter. Churchill allows himself a thin smile. The message read at midnight months earlier had changed everything. Now, the man who delivered it may decide how the war ends.